Okay, a few more attendees now, so we will get started with the introduction. Much like webinar 1, this is being presented in presentation mode. If you do have any questions, there should be a Q&A section where you can post your comments. We really want to hear your feedback and your questions. At the end of the session, we'll do a bit of a run through of some of those key questions that have come up today, so that we can provide you with some kind of immediate feedback and responses. After we've completed all 3 webinars, we'll also pull together a bit of an overview of all the questions that are asked and seek to get those round to attendees, so you all have access to the same information. Anything that's also not covered by the scheme guidance, which will be a focus of the session today, we'll plan to publish as FAQ documents to help out with any common queries that are arising as we launch the scheme. So today we're going to go through a quick bit of background on HUG2. So this webinar hangs together for those that that didn't attend the first webinar, and then dive straight into an overview of the policy, including what we've retained from HUG1, and then some key iterations that we have made for the second phase of the home upgrade grant, and then we'll dive into the guidance document overview. And then, as mentioned, we'll do a bit of a wrap up of the questions. So please do post your comments and questions in the Q&A. So just in terms of the project team here at BEIS, many of you that have a LAD scheme or a HUG1 scheme will be familiar with Sean, who runs the delivery teams for those programs. He'll also be project director for the second phase of HUG. Debbie and the team will be kind of working with you all as we look to implement these projects. I'm James, lead the policy teams across the home upgrade grant. And today I am joined by Katie, who was the kind of key author of the guidance document, and Anna, who many of you will have met yesterday at the webinar. So quick by way of background, many of you will be familiar, but HUG started life as a manifesto commitment back in 2019, with the key aims trying to support low-income households living off the gas grid with energy efficiency and clean heating upgrades. So far, government's allocated 1.1 billion against that manifesto commitment in successive spending reviews. That funding to be delivered from 2022 out to 2025. Lots of you will be local authority representatives that are running a HUG1 scheme. We have 218 million of funding out there that is due to be delivered through to kind of March 2023. We are here today to talk about the second phase of HUG that will run from next year. So we've launched the scheme to make it open to applications, and then we will be expecting survey and sign up to start next year, and then delivery to follow on from HUG1 in the spring and summer of next year. Also, in due course, we're hoping to introduce a direct to consumer route. So we're aware that whilst we've got great coverage across the country, not all local authorities will be able to engage in the scheme, and to avoid postcode lottery, we'd like to introduce a consumer route where households could apply directly for support where it isn't available in their local community. I'll just focus on the 2 main objectives here today. We did cover these in a little more depth during webinar 1, but the main objectives highlighted in amber, in yellow there, progress towards the fuel poverty target, that being to improve the energy performance of low-income households to band C by 2030, and we have interim milestones. The next being to improve as many homes as we can by to band D by 2025. This is really relevant for Hug because there is a prevalence of inefficient housing stock off the gas grid, so those heated by electricity, heating oil, coal, LPG are disproportionately inefficient, so a problem that we need to collectively tackle to make progress towards that Band D milestone. There are also some of the homes that are facing some of the greatest energy costs and struggling this winter and next, so thanks for all of your work on sustainable warmth to support these households in the very immediate term, and hopefully we can work together to upgrade more homes ahead of subsequent winters. On the other side, whilst we're doing that and delivering bill savings for low-income households, we want to reduce the energy required in properties by doing things like insulation measures, so we can decarbonise the housing stock. And where we can, and we'll be having more detail on some of this throughout today's session, installing low carbon heat as part of the package of upgrades so that households are better off and their homes are more consistent on the way to net zero. Some key dates, so we are open. No applications received yet, unsurprisingly, but we're having some webinars to kind of outline some of the key details. So we had webinar 1 on explaining the new challenge fund model. Today, webinar 2 is about the policy and guidance, and next week on the 10th, I believe that's next Tuesday, we'll be having a deep dive into the application form, so you can see the questions that we'll be asking you at the outline stage, and the types of information we'd like to see, and plenty of opportunity to ask questions about that. That is ahead of the first application deadline, so we do have a long window, so local authorities are able to set out and provide us with their applications at any point during that window from now through to the 27th of January to give you guys a bit more flexibility, but we do really encourage those that are able to submit applications by the first assessment window. So we have 700 million to allocate over the next 2 years. It's unlikely that we'll allocate the full 700 million by the 18th of November, but we will not be holding any money back. So all bids that meet the qualifying criteria will be funded, and those projects will have a longer lead in time to be able to procure or recontract delivery partners and hit the ground running next summer. So we really do welcome early applications where it's possible, but being mindful you'll have many competing priorities, so we do retain that flexibility for you. From April, we'll be providing upfront payments, so this will help you with your administrative and ancillary costs and provide you with some funding upfront, so that any time that it takes to approve your batches of delivery won't lead to delays or your leads going cold, and then you can start submitting your batches and delivery from the 1st of April, where we have 350 million per year in both 23-4 and 4-5 to deliver upgrades through to March 2025. So we're going to dive into a bit of the policy now before I hand over to some of the team, starting with some of the fundamentals. Again, an area that many of you will be familiar with, but Hug 2 is intended to kind of follow on from the first phase of Hug, so we're trying not to reinvent the wheel here. So the kind of fundamental focus remains the same, that being that we're looking to support low-income households who are living off the mains gas grid in England with energy efficiency and clean heating upgrades. By low-income households, we define that as broad as we can do. So whilst we're trying to make progress towards our fuel poverty targets, we use a broad interpretation of low income with income deciles 1 to 5, households below median income. So the income threshold has increased, corresponding to median household income increasing, so now set at £31,000. Owner occupiers and private renters are the kind of primary focus of the scheme, and landlords are required to make a minimum contribution of a 33% of the cost of upgrades, so that they are paying some of the costs of upgrading their asset. Social housing is permitted within scope, but only as part of area-based infill to make sure that social tenure properties don't fall between the policy segmentation gaps with social housing. If you do have a scheme that's predominantly focused on improving social housing, then SHDF Wave 2.1 is open and available, and that should be the focus if you're looking to upgrade social housing stock. Grants are for energy efficiency measures and low carbon heating that are compatible with SAP. We are mindful that SAP 10.2 is going to come on stream during this this next phase, which when live will open up new measures that will be eligible for the scheme. So things like batteries in combination with PV. We expect to be kind of more common in this phase compared to previous phases of the scheme. And then EPC eligibility, any home rated from D to G. So yeah, homes that are rated A to C aren't currently eligible for the scheme, and yeah, we have that focus on supporting the worst homes first and improving them up to A band C to alleviate fuel poverty. So new design, and so we've got some new things that we've introduced into HUG 2, and this is arguably probably the most important slide in the deck. So I'll take a little more time in walking through this one. So the first, and we had a whole webinar on this earlier in the week, is the challenge fund allocation model. So we have moved from a local authority competition model, where local authorities were required to submit a bid, compete against each other with some scored criteria. Not all local authorities were able to receive funding under that model, and presented some challenges in that all of the information was required up front. And then we're seeing quite a few change requests because local authorities will set out an ambition and an intent to upgrade certain property archetypes with a set of measures, and then it's a challenge to find homes that kind of meet those conditions in delivery and practice. So we have split the application process up so that at the point of application, so for the 18th of November, the outline application will require information on how you're going to set eligibility criteria, verify and target low-income households within your area, set an overall ambition for the project in terms of how many homes you'll be seeking to upgrade, and then an initial forecast of when you're planning to do those, and then some details on how you're planning to procure or amend contracts to have delivery partners in place to deliver these upgrades. What we're not doing at that point is asking for detailed housing stock and measure mixes. That will come later as part of the batch assessment process. Hopefully that means there is a lower burden for you in pulling together those initial applications, and then you're providing information based on the housing stock and the measures mix at the appropriate time in the journey where you've been out, marketed, signed up households, you know which homes and which measures and how much it costs, so that we can assess those, get it approved, and funding can be delivered. The second, and I guess a common theme, is we've tried to, where we can, to make a few things easier for kind of delivery and practice, and point 2 here is a key one of those. So we have removed the 30% cap on band D rated homes. So under HUG 1, a project can include up to 30% of band D rated homes, and 70% have to be E, F or G rated. We have removed that from HUG 2, both to kind of facilitate area-based delivery, and there is a high prevalence under SAP 10.2 of oil heated homes in band D. One of our key objectives, as explained on the earlier slides, is to phase out that high carbon housing stock, so we don't want to present any barriers to that delivery. So hopefully that will make things slightly easier in pulling together projects and implementing them in practice. Also, Another kind of key amendment is the introduction of area-based eligibility. So under HUG 1, there was the sole income-based eligibility, whereby a household had to be under a certain income threshold, and you would set verification criteria, typically using means-tested benefits, to verify that low-income status. Under HUG 2, we're introducing area-based eligibility using the indices of multiple deprivation. We've published a list of postcodes where the 30% most economically deprived areas of the country will be automatically eligible where they meet other HUG criteria, so that you don't need to perform additional income verification checks on those households. Looking at some of our stats, we still get about a 40% fuel poverty hit rate, and the majority of households are on a lower income in those postcodes. So another area where we're wanting to balance what can be delivered in practice against other kind of key government considerations around fuel poverty and levelling up. The private rented sector, and we'll have a bit more content on this later in the presentation. We have made some iterations here to limit support to investment landlords. So we're particularly concerned about landlords who own fewer properties and maybe less able to kind of make investments in their own assets, versus your corporate and investment landlords who might own a significant suite of properties and be planning to kind of upgrade them. So we want to support those kind of smaller landlords through this government grant funding. So we are limiting the number of properties an individual landlord can own, and the net funding that landlords can receive through this funding mechanism. We've tried to make the scheme coherent with social housing and worked closely with SHDF colleagues, including on outcome metrics. So we both aspire to improve homes by 2 EPC bands up to band C, and whilst doing that, we want to focus on measures that can improve the fabric of the property in line with the principles of PAS 2035 and reduce space heating demand in the properties, so that it's particularly important in a time where energy prices are particularly volatile. We want to reduce the amount of energy that is required in each property so that a home costs less to heat. So we've introduced an aspiration for a space heating demand consideration when the retrofit coordinator is planning those upgrades. Cost caps is another area that we've made some iterations from HUG 1. So we have split out the cost caps for energy efficiency and clean heat, having sessions with many local authorities and their delivery partners operating in practice. It was clear, and in part due to some of the inflationary costs that we've seen across the sector, that measures like solid wall insulation and clean heating were in competition within the HUG 1 cost caps, so it wasn't possible to install more than one of those things, which made clean heat delivery in particular a challenge, because we would typically want to see the fabric measures installed first. So we have created distinct cost caps to reduce that competition, so that there is a budget based upon the property archetype, the characteristics of the property, to install energy efficiency measures in the home so that we can get the home up to the required standard, and then an additional allocation available for clean heat where it's suitable for the property and the low income household wishes to take it up. Speaking of which, we have refined the advice on the heat pump offer. So in particular, in the current context of people being acutely mindful of their energy bills, we want to make sure that all households are receiving strong advice about the choice to transition to low carbon heating. We have a couple of safeguards in there that Katie will talk you through later, but making sure that based on the kind of RDSAP methodologies, that homes aren't going backwards on a cost-based metric, and also that they're receiving advice about what it means for them in practice to transition to low carbon heat. We still feel that many households, when receiving a package of upgrades alongside clean heat, can both be better off in terms of their kind of carbon footprint and achieve bill savings. So there are some clear win-wins in delivering clean heat to this off-grid stock. And finally, geographic spread and decarbonisation. So we are looking to ring fence 60% of the HUG2 funding. So 60% of the 700 million to rural local authorities. So this will be defined using the DEFRA rural urban classification system and set at the local authority level. We'll talk you through some of that during today's presentation about what it means for consortium and things like that. I think all of those topics are going to be covered in a little bit more detail by Anna first and then Katie. So I believe I'm handing over to you, Anna.
I believe that's right. Thanks, James. Right, so we're going to get started by looking at changes to eligibility policy in HUG2. So there are two routes for households to be eligible for HUG2 funding. And the first one is the same as the existing route under HUG1, the income threshold. James has already touched on it earlier, and you'll already hopefully be familiar with this route. It's the one it's up to you as a local authority to determine how you will verify a household as low income. And as James mentioned, one thing to note is that the income threshold has increased from £30,000 a year to £31,000 a year, and this is to reflect the rise in the median household income. And the second is the area-based route. So this is a new route that's been introduced under HUG2, and it will enable you to carry out area-based projects and upgrades in specific locations. And I'll go on to this in the next slide to cover it in a bit more detail. Right. So I'm also in charge of sharing my screen, so it's a lot to do. So our statisticians have separated out the income element from the indices of multiple deprivations, or the IMD, and have found high rates of fuel poor and low income households living in income deciles 1 to 3. Oh yeah, this is correct, that's fine. So as you can see here, the fuel poverty rate was found to be approximately 40%, and it was found to have a really high low income rate as well living in these areas. And therefore these income deciles, we feel they represent not only the 30% most economically deprived LSOAs in the country, but they also offer us a really useful tool to target those low income households. So under this new route, all EPC D to G off gas grid homes, which are living in these income deciles, are becoming automatically eligible for HUG2. So we've published a list of eligible postcodes on the HUG webpage, and therefore we hope you'll be able to target whole streets for retrofits and benefit from having reduced verification admin. It means a lot less work for you verifying households as being low income, and also hopefully you'll benefit from the economies of scale that we hope that this sort of route will offer you by being able to target entire streets or blocks of flats under HUG2. So how do you use this new eligibility route? So we've made it as easy as possible for you to include this route within your projects. So as I said, we've got that published list of eligible postcodes, and it's postcodes all across England. And to use this eligibility route, all you need to do is let us know within the outline application form, indicate to us that you intend to use this route as part of your targeting and verification methods. And then when it comes to delivery, you'll be able to upgrade off-gas grid and EPC D to G homes within these postcodes without that need for an income verification check. And then when it comes to reporting and data collection, we ask you to let us know whether the houses you're submitting in your batches were verified under the low income route or the area-based IMD route. And that's just so that we can see how successful it's been, whether you think it's a route that has worked well for you and that you've actually used. And there's a link here to the list of eligible postcodes if you do have trouble finding that. So then, and again, James has already sort of touched on this, but the private rented sector and Band Ds. So similar to HUG policy and HUG1, many homes in the private rented sector will still be eligible for HUG2 funding, and eligibility will still be based on the tenant being low income, and landlords must still pay 1/3 contribution to the cost of the overall retrofit. However, we are introducing some additional restrictions on PRS eligibility in HUG2, and as James said, we're aiming to target that government funding towards those smaller landlords who might not otherwise be able to afford to upgrade their properties, and perhaps even be pushed out of the sector, and prevent those large investment landlords from using HUG funding across across their entire stock and improve the value of their assets using government funding. So therefore, only landlords with a portfolio of 4 or fewer rental properties will be eligible for HUG 2, and we offer a few suggestions for checks that you can carry out to satisfy yourselves of this in the guidance, so please do take a look at that. And in addition to this, landlords must also declare that they have not received subsidy over those stated in the small amounts of financial assistance exemption of the UK-EU Trading Cooperation Agreement. And again, this is just to ensure that no individual landlord receives an unfair amount of government funding. And this policy change retains private sector eligibility for 83% of landlords, and it represents 52% of tenancies. So a large proportion of the private rented sector will still remain eligible for HUG 2 funding. And it's also just important to note that these rules will still apply when you're using the IMD area-based route for verification, but it doesn't bypass these. These will still be relevant in those circumstances. So it's important to know that LA's, you will be designing your own fraud prevention plan to enforce the 4 property cap. But as I said, take a look in the guidance that we do have some suggestions for checks that you can carry out. And then finally, HUG 1, as James said, does used to cap upgrades to EPC Band D homes at 30%, and this is something that we've heard your feedback on and taken that into consideration. And so we will be removing this cap for HUG 2, and that's to support you in the deliverability in the scale up of your projects, and it will also support the strategic imperative of phasing out heating oil, because that's disproportionately represented in Band D stock in the latest SAP update. So we want to include as many of those oil heated homes as possible, so we're removing that cap on Band D properties. And then I will be handing over to Katie.
Hey everyone, thanks Anna. Just quickly before I talk to you about measures, we've been having in the background some Q&A problems. So we, thanks to Sam, set up a Slido, which has been emailed out to everyone who's invited to this webinar. So do just quickly check your emails, and that should be in there. If for some reason you can't access your emails, I'm about to read out the code for the Slido. So do get a pen or your notebook ready, and I'll read that out now. So the code is 3494890. 3494890. So please do pop onto Slido and ask any questions, and we'll do a roundup at the end. So I'll talk to you about measures now. So for HUG 2, we have graded all the eligible measures to put into households into 3 categories: grade A, grade B and grade C. We asked that 60% of the total measure costs per local authority project, so not per household, must be spent on grade A measures, 40% grade B, 10% grade C. This has been calculated based on, so I've just been told I'm quite quiet, so I do hope you can hear me. Measures are categorised based on some considerations, and there's more detail in the guidance as to how we've come to this, including strategic fit, value for money, and the expected prevalence of the rollout for each measure type expected across the scheme. Move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So this shows the categories that the measures have been assigned to. So as you can see, the grade A measures tend to be fabric measures. So we've got wall insulation, loft insulation, draft proofing, heating controls, smart controls, and then also air source heat pumps, ground source heat pumps, communal heat networks, that kind of thing. And then towards the other end, the grade C measures, we've got the measures that we prefer to only have to put in homes where other things aren't available, so such as biomass and high retention storage heaters. This is all this detail is in the guidance, so do check that out. Next slide. Thank you. So yeah, as I've just hinted on, we expect retrofit to follow a fabric first approach. So fabric measures before clean heat measures, and this is reflected in the grading. So a lot of the fabric measures are given the grade A. We prefer and we expect that local authorities will focus on low temperature heat pumps as the lead clean heating technology. And I'll in a second talk a little bit more about the way in which we expect those heat pumps to be installed. we are aware there will be homes where heat pumps are not a suitable technology. In those circumstances, we expect the following technologies to be considered, and this is an order of priority. And this will be based on the kind of decisions made by the retrofit coordinator, based on value for money, deliverability, affordability, sustainability, and air quality. So near the top of that is, if possible, the connection to a local low carbon heat network, and then towards the end, the installation of solid biomass. And here is where we want to bear in mind the air quality considerations, and then high retention storage heaters, but only in flats which are already heated electrically. Next slide. Thank you. So as I mentioned in the previous slide, we want heat pumps to be installed as the lead clean heat technology in homes. However, we have added some additional requirements for the retrofit around consumer advice in light of increasing energy bills, just to ensure that consumers are able to make an informed decision, which will require the retrofit coordinator to closely follow PAS 2035 best practice. So we expect that in all homes that are technically suitable for a heat pump, it is made clear to the household that this is an available option as part of the retrofit package. This will be based on MCS guidance, a SAP assessment of the property, and the intended outcomes of retrofit, which are agreed between the household and the retrofit coordinator before the assessment begins. As part of the PAS 2035 best practice, retrofit coordinators will be required to undertake a BEIS assessment of the impact that the heat pump will have on energy costs for the household. And we will require that retrofit coordinators communicate this information to the household. And as part of this, they make clear whether a heat pump is simply available because it's a technically suitable option for retrofit, or whether it's being recommended as part of the retrofit package based on the likely bill impacts of heat pump installation. And we expect that the final decision about installing a heat pump should always sit with the consumer, so that they're fully aware of the installation, how it will work. They're kind of aware of the heat pump and they trust it as a way that they can get their energy, and that they understand the impacts that that might have on their bills. So next slide, or am I handing over to you now, Anna? Hand over, great.
Yeah, back to me. Thanks, Katie. Yes, so I'm going to talk about cost caps now. So you can see here the first table shows the cost caps under HUG 1. So these were based on the EPC banding and the fuel type of the property. However, under HUG 2, the new challenge fund model really enables our cost caps to be a lot more bespoke and be a lot more of an accurate reflection of real life costs. Because as James mentioned, at the batch application stage, when you're submitting the detailed data on properties, you will know the characteristics of the property. So that's the wall type and the archetype, and you'll have the proposed measure mix and costings. So all in all, you'll have a much more detailed picture of the homes that you'll be retrofitting when you actually submit that data. So one of the main policy changes to these cost caps is that they'll be based on the property characteristics rather than the EPC bandings. So you can see the wall type, so cavity or solid wall, and the archetype of the property, whether it's a flat, a mid-terrace, or a semi-detached, detached, or an end-of-terrace building. And the second main policy change here is that we're introducing distinct cost caps for energy efficiency and low carbon heat. And this is to ensure appropriate spending on each type of measure, and to make sure, as James said, you don't have to choose between the two types of measures, that there's no competition created for funding between the two. So you can see in this table for the energy efficiency cost cap it's dependent on the property archetype, and it's dependent on what kind of wall type the property has as well. So the minimum cost cap for energy efficiency measures is £3,000 and the maximum is £24,000. And in addition to this, there is also the cost cap for the low carbon heat measures. And you can see this is also dependent on the property archetype, with the maximum cost being the minimum cost being £5,000 and the maximum being £14,000. So both cost caps can be accessed for a single property, meaning that the maximum grant available per home is £38,000. But again, important to note that averaging across properties within a project is also still permitted under HUG 2. so bear that in mind. So cost caps is quite an area of significant change being introduced under HUG 2. So I'll take us on to the Home Upgrade Hub now. And this is a new support available to yourselves, to local authorities, for help with applications. It's available to all local authorities who are interested in applying to HUG 2, and our commercial partner Turner and Townsend will be delivering this service. The type of support available includes a knowledge hub, which will provide support and information to guide you through a retrofit project entire life cycle, drawing together all of the best practice and guidance from the industry. It will also provide workshops, seminars and roundtables on specific focus areas. And some of the things it will offer support on are data collection, stock analysis and business case development. And that's just a snapshot of all the things it will offer support with, but you'll find the full list listed in our guidance, so do take a look there as well. But lots of support, especially on that initial project planning as you start planning your schemes for HUG. So you can self-refer to the Home Upgrade HUG, or it might be that we direct you to it if you're successful at either the outline application stage or the delivery assurance checks. But active support will be offered to groups or individual local authorities until completion of those delivery assurance checks. And then during the batch application stage, you'll be able to access passive resources, which will remain on the website and be available for the duration of the scheme. So there will also be support available for rural local authorities to deliver that 60% ring fence, and offering bespoke workshops, seminars and roundtables to support those specifically rural applications. And I'll hand over to Katie to go back over those geographic distributions.
Seamless handover from talking about the Home Upgrade Hub to the rural ring fence. So yes, as has already been mentioned, 60% of the total funding available for HUG 2 will be ring fence for local authorities, which we define as rural, using DEFRA's rural urban local authority classification. So the table you can see on the right hand side of the screen is the rural urban local authority classification, and this is based on the percentage of the population that reside in rural areas within that local authority. So we will be classifying as rural local authorities which are mainly rural, largely rural and urban with significant rural. There's a full list of classifications for each local authority has been published alongside our guidance, so that's available on the gov.uk Home Upgrade Grant page, so do check that out if you're not sure where you qualify within that rural urban classification. So we've brought this in because phasing out the highest carbon fossil fuel heating is a strategic priority for the government, and we think that 60% is a representative number to ring fence for rural local authorities, because 60% of HUG's total eligible pool is located within those rural local authorities, and 61% of HUG 1 funding went to rural local authorities. 90% of oil heated homes are located in rural local authorities, and while the 60% ring fence is not specified to be used in fossil fuel homes, we do think that this is a really good way of making sure that we do target those highest carbon fossil fuel heated homes. There's a link there to where the local authority classification can be found. For consortia applications, there's no need for these to be specifically rural or specifically urban. There can be a mix of both rural and urban local authorities within a consortia application. When we do get these consortia applications, it will be as simple as just dividing our kind of two funding pots between the rural and urban local authorities within that consortia representatively. Next slide, please. This is just a really simple graphic of how the ring fence will work. It will kind of all be done at our end. So when you apply to the scheme, there will be a kind of drop down where you select your rurality classification. We will review that when looking at the applications, and the money will simply be allocated into one of those two pots. We will monitor this throughout the lifetime of HUG 2 to see where the kind of delivery and the funding is going within that rural urban split. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the kind of policy overview section of this presentation. I'm going to really quickly talk you through the guidance that we published last week when we launched the scheme. You may or may not have had a chance to take a look at this document yet. It is long, so I imagine you probably haven't had a chance to go all the way through it, but it really is worth a read. We've got everything in there, every kind of policy element of the scheme, so do make sure you've given it a thorough read through before you apply for the scheme. So in this document, we've got various different things. It's aimed at local authorities wanting to apply to the scheme, so this isn't something to give to the households in your area. In there, we've got a really detailed description of how to apply to the scheme. So this includes how the challenge fund will work, and that whole process to help kind of clarify everything, how you will go through that process. We've also got a big section on eligibility, so that's eligible local authorities, eligible households, properties, and measures. So that whole list that I went through earlier, that's in there. Got a section on cost caps, a section on the home upgrade hub, how payments will work, and then a bit on the rural ring fence as well. And we've also got a kind of neat annex towards the end, which accurately describes the changes between Hug 1 and Hug 2. So if you're really familiar with Hug 1, then that might be a good place to start to familiarise yourself with the new scheme. Next slide. So the next couple of slides are just, I'm just going to talk you through some of the new things that we've put into the Hug 2 guidance that weren't in the Sustainable Warmth competition if you did apply for that. So at the very start, we've added a kind of overview of every section of the guidance. This is a really good place to start, but crucially, it doesn't kind of substitute reading the whole thing. But again, it will help kind of familiarise yourself with particularly the application process and how payments work. So that is a good place to start, and as a refresher as well. This is a handy diagram, we hope, for how the Challenge Fund application process will work. This is really worth kind of studying if you're still unsure of that process. Anna and Monty did do a workshop last week, which hopefully you were able to attend, but if not, there will be a recording of that online. So do give that a watch if this is still something that's not familiar to you. But yeah, this hopefully kind of sets out the whole process from outline application stage all the way to how the batches and the delivery will work, and kind of our role and your role. So do check that out. And finally, I've touched on this already. This is new. We didn't have a kind of consumer journey under Sustainable Warmth for Hug 1, but we've brought in a consumer advice journey for the installation of a heat pump. This clearly sets out the role of a retrofit assessor, retrofit coordinator, retrofit designer, the local authority, and the household. So this is worth looking at. It should kind of set out what we expect pre-install and post-install to ensure that consumers are aware of the heat pump that they're getting put into their home, the impact that it's going to have on their bills, and that they know how it works and they feel confident and comfortable using it once the install is finished and the retrofit coordinator has done. So that's worth looking at as well to make sure we really ensure that consumers are protected when they get a heat pump. So that does bring us to the end. We will go on to a bit of a summary of what's going on in the Slido Q&A in a second, but your first port of call if you are stuck, need some advice, need some help, will be the Home Upgrade Hub. So there's their website, there's their email address. Do contact them, or as Anna said, we can put them in touch with you if you need it, but that is worth going to as a first port of call. So I'll hand back to James to kind of do a bit of a summary of the questions and close this off.
Thanks, Katie, and thank you to everybody that's been posting questions in the Slido. I'll do a bit of a run through of those, so we do have a bit of time so that you can get some immediate responses in addition to those that have been moderated, but so that everybody in the call can hear them and those watching back on the Home Upgrade Hub. So a first question around expectations of when the new SAP software will be launched, whether you should be redoing EPCs now before making an application. So just to clarify, so as part of the Challenge Fund model, you're not required to be providing us with housing stock information at the time that you're making your outline application. That will be done when you have signed up and surveyed households, including what mix of measures will be going into those properties. We will get in touch with the SAP team here at BEIS, who'll work with those that will be developing the software to operationalize SAP 10.2 and seek to clarify that in FAQs. But our expectation would be, in line with PAS 2035, you do a pre-install RDSAP based assessment, and the retrofit assessor would be recommending the mix of measures. So an up-to-date RDSAP assessment as part of that new embedded customer journey. So I would say you don't need to do new EPCs right now, but a new RDSAP assessment will update any pre-existing EPC data as part of the installation process. As part of HUG 2, we will clarify on the software point though. It's a good point. A question about can a home be upgraded if they received LAD funding or HUG 1? Within HUG 2, obviously the scope is off-grid only. LAD 3 at least is only eligible for available for those on the gas grid, so they wouldn't be kind of eligible for HUG 2. If you have a HUG 1 home that's been treated, they can receive some further support under HUG 2, but only for low carbon heating. So as in the case that we're explaining earlier, we've seen a lot of homes starting to receive insulation measures, but not the clean heat. So they might be being made heat pump ready under HUG 1 and receive their low carbon heating under HUG 2, and that is acceptable within the terms of HUG 2. Another question about how best to identify off-grid households, and are EPCs generally accurate for this? So yeah, EPCs are a really good starting place for this kind of information. So whilst there are well-known issues with some EPC data, heating types are relatively accurate and don't. It's the frequency of fuel type. It doesn't change too often, so we are wanting to see that transition from fossil fuels to low carbon heating. But in many cases, the absence of a gas boiler on an EPC certificate is a really good place to start identifying homes that are off the gas grid. There is also things like the ExoServe data, which has gas meter points of all gas properties, and a few years ago we published a non-gas map, so do pop that in a search engine. It's quite an interesting tool that can drill into local authority areas and show you the prevalence of certain wards of their off-grid stock. How far away are they from a gas main? Another good resource. Looking further down, yeah, as mentioned, the definition of an off-gas grid is the same as HUG 1, so it is a property that isn't heated by mains gas. So yeah, if they have a gas connection to the property but only have a gas cooker, those properties are off gas. We have clarified, because it is one of the issues that has arisen during HUG 1 delivery. If a property has a broken gas boiler, that doesn't make them eligible for HUG 2. So if they're using electric as a secondary heat source whilst they have a broken gas boiler, that doesn't make them off the gas grid and therefore eligible for HUG 2. So it is for homes that are not connected to the gas network for heating purposes. Are the cost caps a maximum amount or an average? And a couple of questions related to that about a cost caps averaged over a batch. Really good questions, and it's good that you're thinking ahead to those detailed rules within batch delivery. Again, it's probably a question we can clarify some of the nuance within our FAQs, and we're likely to hold further webinars as we get a bit nearer to batch delivery. But yeah, you're exactly right to tease out those issues that you will build tolerances in the submission of your batches. So the first batch that you will submit will need to meet all of the thresholds for those cost caps. But if you were to spend less on given homes, you would build yourself tolerances to be able to average over the lifetime of delivery. We'll get into the weeds of some of that when we're a bit nearer batch delivery in the new year. But yeah, at high level, yeah, there are tolerances and averages to make delivery pragmatic on the ground, and but you can't breach those tolerances early and then promise to average that out later. Just flicking through some of these questions. So there's one here about the IMD, whether that's an income decile 1 to 3 or 1 to 5. Just to clarify, we're talking about a few different deciles there, so perhaps easier to talk about it in percentage terms. So decile 1 to 3, 30% most economically deprived areas will be eligible for support under the area-based route that don't require additional income verification. The overarching now 31,000 is to reflect income deciles 1 to 5. So that is effectively the 50% lowest income households within the country. That aligns with income deciles 1 to 5, but they are two different decile measures. So 30% for area based, less than median, less than 50% for direct income. Question here about the IMD data showing in one particular local area, nearly 5,000 eligible postcodes. Yeah, that'll be common, in particular if you are an urban authority. I was doing some spot checking on this myself. Yeah, rest assured you're not required to list all 4,800 postcodes that you're planning to work within, but just kind of list, there is some, and we'll be having a webinar on this next Tuesday that will go through each detailed question, including where you're required to input here. We'll just be looking for the overall number of postcodes in your local authority area. You won't have to list the individual postcodes. We will want that postcode information as part of your reporting data. A question about LAD 4, and I think this came up at the previous webinar. So yeah, government currently doesn't have any plans to introduce a fourth phase of local authority delivery. The eco scheme has increased in scope, and yeah, is going to be the primary way of delivering support to lower income households that are on the gas grid, in combination with HUG, which focuses on those off the gas grid, and social housing decarbonisation fund that focuses on those living in social housing. Eco 4 has both increased in size and increased the availability of funding delivered via local authority flex. So hopefully there is a role for many of you that have been delivering LAD 4 schemes in increasing the size of your kind of eco flex schemes. Some more detailed questions coming in there, but as we're coming up to 3, I think we might leave it around there, unless Anna or Katie, are there any that you wanted to pick out from the Slido to respond on today? Otherwise, we'll perhaps wrap it up there and provide a bit of a summary of those questions.
There was a question that I have now lost, I'm afraid, but it was about the rural ring fence and how that will work kind of on the ground in the local authority. Just to clarify, this is at the BEIS end, so all you need to kind of worry about for the rural ring fence is whether or not you're classified as an urban or a rural local authority on the list that we published on gov.uk. this will have kind of no impact on where you deliver the funding on the ground within local authorities. So we will allocate you, for example, if you're an urban local authority, a proportion of funding, and you deliver that anywhere within your local authority boundaries. So it kind of has no impact on you on the ground. Yeah, that's the only one I wanted to directly respond to.
And yeah, I'm okay. No questions for me.
Great. So there's many more detailed questions in there. What we'll do is we'll take some of those away and yeah, write them up and share with attendees, in addition to any further questions we receive at the final of the first 3 set of webinars, which will focus on the application form and scoring criteria. Lots of screenshots of the application form itself and the type of information we would like to see when making applications. So hopefully we will see or hear via the Q&A chat comments from many of you next Tuesday at that 3rd and final webinar, and then yeah, we will endeavour to circulate a full list of the Q&A received. So thanks for all of your comments, questions and interest and attending today. And yeah, we'll leave it there for webinar 2. Thanks very much for attending.
Thanks everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you.